So it seems like at this point in time, due to numerous accessory manufacturing leaks, that we have a rough idea of exactly what Nintendo Switch 2 will look like. It also seems that we probably know by now that the name is indeed Nintendo Switch 2. And if you just look at Nintendo's history with them releasing new console hardware, they oftentimes like to have some kind of new standout feature or gimmick, if you will, as something that this console can do that our previous offering could not, or some kind of additional way to push the creativity and the marketing mindset of the reason why, anybody that just doesn't want a more powerful version of what they have should still go out and get this new upgraded piece of tech that they are releasing. And one interesting button that of course you all have all seen in detail by now, due to all of these leaks that have happened for the console directly, is that it seems like for sure we have on the right Joy-Con an additional button beneath the home button, and it is labeled C. That is something that has appeared in just about every accessory manufacturer leak with the C included. The CAD renderings that we saw that were kind of hard to make out what that button might be used for in the past. We then got, companies like D-Brand saying they straight up had a 3D scan of the finalized Switch 2 unit, and that button is indeed titled C. So obviously there are some interesting ideas that have appeared online, and I want to weigh in with my 2 cents today in this video on what I personally believe this could be tied to. We're going to go through some likely button functions. We're also going to go through some exciting ones, but ones that I don't necessarily think will actually be what the button is used for. So we'll get on the same page with all of this. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first start off with, honestly, probably the most exciting feature that this button could be used for, but also one that I personally am not expecting Nintendo to see implement for the button, but it would be very exciting if it did. So there's this idea that maybe this C stands for cast, and cast would be used for something of a remote play connection where you have your Switch in your hand, the dock, which we do believe has a fan in it and could have some internal components that maybe, make it able to be used as a standalone hub separate from your Switch, but you're having to use like essentially wireless HDMI to connect your Switch to the dock, which isn't great for latency and lag and things like that. Just FYI, Wii U did it kind of through a different way of doing that technology where the controller was looking directly for the console, and the controller, it didn't have the most advanced internals in it. But could Nintendo do the reverse thing where the more advanced internals are on the Switch and you have a more simplified dock, but you can somehow get a dual screen gameplay setup with Nintendo's next piece of hardware? And while it is possible from a technology standpoint, and it would also solve for a big issue, and maybe Nintendo is actually baking this into the console as the solve for the problem that is bringing DS and 3DS games to Nintendo Switch Online for docked play, because while you can use the touchscreen and have two screens side by side in handheld mode, if they were to bring those consoles over to NSO to continue to build out their library, like I do believe we will see them do one day. I mean, we've even seen DS games release on Virtual Console, and they will want to go back through that library at some point. It would be a interesting fix for essentially you have a touchscreen now in your hands, and then on the screen you would have the main display or the top of a DS console that you can look at, and you can still have access to do all of the touch inputs on the console itself. That's the main simple idea on how Nintendo could solve for that problem. And then you could also say it could be an optional feature for Switch 2 games where you might want to use something like a second display in certain cases, maybe on some more simple titles. Maybe it just gives developers that much more creative freedom if they want a dual screen setup. I really personally do not expect that cast is what this button will ultimately be. While I love the idea of having that kind of functionality, I don't think it's quite there yet from a overall usability standpoint, both with just things like input delay and lag, and more importantly, probably the battery life would be significantly downgraded if you were casting it to your TV and you're running two displays essentially off of one piece of hardware that probably isn't plugged in if you're holding it in your hands. Yeah, that's going to be something that will have a lot of power draw and could just present problems from a simplicity standpoint of using Nintendo's next gen hardware. And they want the experience to be very uniform, easy to understand, easy to use and across the board for every user that picks up a Switch 2. So I'm ruling out cast personally, even though I think it's one of the more interesting and exciting ideas. Now from there, I want to say capture and or camera kind of in the same conversation here. So I don't think it's the capture button for footage on the Nintendo Switch 2. I do hope that Nintendo builds out the capture system a little bit better than what we have on the Switch. If you want to record, say, longer sections of gameplay, like maybe whenever you hit that capture button on the left side of the Joy-Con, which if you're unfamiliar is like a camera symbol. So it literally is still there on the next gen hardware, which is also why I don't think the C button means capture or camera. But so with the idea being maybe you hit that left button and it pulls up a more customizable gameplay capture system where you can, record the last 5 minutes or the last 30 minutes of your gameplay session, and you can just have things predetermined, or if you press and hold it, it's just going to record for just the section of gameplay that you were pressing and holding it. They could get creative with that kind of stuff, but I think that all of the capture functionality in this next gen hardware is still tied to that left button on the Joy-Con and not the one on the right. And the only reason I'm saying camera in the same breath is just because, we did have that one Japanese or Chinese, I believe Japanese YouTuber that posted up a video with the 3D mock-up, kind of the first one to do it. And she was claiming that that top USB-C port was going to be used for different accessories for Nintendo, and that a camera would be one of the big gimmick features that they would lead out the console launch with, and that you're going to be able to plug in some kind of USB-C camera to the top of it, and then maybe that C button is to open up that camera interface. I don't see the reason for Nintendo to add a camera onto their next gen hardware, and I also don't think that they will, and I don't think that that's what that C button is going to be for. So I've pretty much written off that idea as a possibility entirely. And while camera functionality I guess is cool, it's on every smartphone. You don't need it on your game console as well, in my opinion. You could say maybe Nintendo wants to do some more advanced AR related stuff and they're going to go in that direction as a gimmick, but again, this is stuff they've done in the past on the DS, 3DS era games, and I don't think that we're going to see them go that route with the C button. From there, I do want to transition into two of the more likely ideas that I do think this button could be used for. And one of them is now coming up because you might remember in a recent video, we talked about the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, or Switch 2 Pro controller rather, and some supposed claimed new buttons to be on the back of that controller. And if those new buttons are indeed there, it would also lead many people to believe that maybe those top Joy-Con buttons that we've seen in all of the accessory manufacturing renders would actually be for input and not necessarily to detach your Joy-Con. And now, while we've been talking about how the Joy-Cons will attach to the system, it's believed to be magnets this time around instead of a rail system. In fact, there will not be a rail system, but rather a kind of more complex way that the controller fits into the console itself, and it will be held with magnets. We have seen reports over the course of time that these are mag switches or use electromagnetism to actually really secure these Joy-Cons on, where you would not be able to pull them off unless if you were to trigger some type of release. Well, if those buttons on the back are not believed to be release buttons, but rather input buttons, maybe the C is for connect or something to that effect, and that's actually the button you would hit to engage or release the magnet system to be able to pull out your Joy-Cons. It is entirely possible that it's something as simple as that. Still not necessarily leaning towards that being the idea, but if we are to believe these recent reports that Pro controller will have back input buttons and we have those on the Joy-Cons and they're actually going to be used for gameplay, I'm thinking you're going to need some kind of other way to securely hold in those Joy-Cons. Maybe the magnets are just strong enough where you would just pull it apart, but you'd have to use some force to do so. But again, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but it is an idea that I could see Nintendo implementing and tying to that button. The last idea, and actually what I personally am leaning towards the most in terms of what I think this button is going to be used for, it is in the social function overall. So you could say community, you could say chat, you could say connect even also for this one, but something that Nintendo will brand kind of their command center, which also works into the C equation for both words. So, essentially when you press a PlayStation 5 home button, you kind of have a mini menu that pops up that isn't the home menu, that you can do a lot of this console functionality within a game. And one of the things that you're going to want to do potentially while you're in a game and not have to go back to the main home menu is to be able to chat with friends, connect with friends, see who's online, send a game invite, maybe send a direct message, whether that be via voice and joining into a room with them, or just something that you would text to them directly that they would get. But I think having some kind of command center that pops up whenever you press that C button while you're still in a game, that shows you your friends that are online, that allows you to write messages back and forth, and kind of has that central hub of different quick customizations that you can do from a social aspect. I do think Nintendo might consider doing a dedicated button for something like that, because the home button is still going to take you out to that main menu, and the C button could be that connect, community, command center, whatever you want to call it button. And I actually think that we will see Nintendo do stuff like on system party chat this time around, where you can, you know, join into a party of up to 8 different players and all hear each other's voices. I think if we're to believe stuff like the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack being in the Pro controller directly, that helps support that theory. Not to mention, it does seem like we have seen a microphone cutout on all of these different accessory manufacturing leaks that suggest that a microphone is on the system itself. So when you're in handheld play, you would be able just to easily chat with your friends with no headset or anything required. And I think that that is a logical progression that Nintendo will get into, even though there's reason for them not to want to be involved in moderating all of that. And you know what? Maybe they just support Discord and that's how it works. But nonetheless, I think in 2025, when this console launches, and they know how gamers communicate and get together in game nowadays, and voice chat and or just a messaging system is entirely an expected feature in the modern online environment we find ourselves in. You can turn it off via parental controls very easily if you wanted to in the system features from the core level of the OS, but I think it's going to be there, and I do actually believe that this C button could in some way, shape, or form be tied to that. One last, idea that I've seen maybe floated around is that it's like a C button, like from the gameplay perspective, back from the N64 controller. This to me looks like a system function button. It is not in a great place if it's going to be used for gameplay in any way, shape, or form, because it's beneath the home button. So I think it does something system level, and I think that chat and command center, or whatever it ends up being called, makes a lot more sense than something like a C button to be used for in-game gameplay. But that's where I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video. What do you personally believe this mystery C button is? And do you think it's tied to some kind of large gimmick that Nintendo is going to market their next gen console around? Or do you personally believe it's going to be something on the smaller side? And out of what we've discussed, whether that be cast, do you think that that's actually what this button means? Or are you like me and you think that it's more than likely going to be some kind of chat, community, connect type of feature? Do you think it's tied to the Joy-Cons magnetically attaching in, or is it something more system level, like how you're going to pull up a command center to chat with your friends, for example? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.